Hi, and welcome to Newswire L.A. I'm your host, Chin Thomasangsi. We're back for part 2 of our exclusive interview with District Attorney's candidate Alan Jackson. Last week we got to hear a lot of his platform, and we got to find out a lot of the ideas he wants to implement should he become the District Attorney of the County of Los Angeles. Well, this week we want to continue and find out more about this candidate. So before I go too far and reveal too much, we'll be right back after this. And now I'm going to throw it back to my colleague in downtown Los Angeles, Jamie Wright, who is sitting with Alan Jackson right now.
Leading up to the June primary, there was a lot of media presumption that it would be a Carmen Trutanic, Alan Jackson race. It has now shifted to a Jackie Lacey, Alan Jackson race. How has that been a game changer for you in terms of your campaign strategy?
Well, Jamie, you're exactly right. There was a lot of folks who believed, because of the momentum, the campaign momentum that Carmen Trutanic sort of had going into the June 5th election, that he was the presumptive winner. He was expected to outperform every other candidate. We internally knew that we were doing everything right. We truly believed that we had the right strategy and the right goals. Can I say that I was a soothsayer and saw this coming? No, I can't say that. I wouldn't say that. But we certainly felt very comfortable that we would get into the runoff. Now that it's a runoff between Jackie Lacey and myself, it's going to be a different campaign. It has to be a different campaign because there are different personalities involved. Mm-hmm. But I look very forward to a robust discussion about the issues and the qualifications of each candidate. I think as we move toward the election, and you've touched on this a couple of times during this interview, there are some true distinctions between myself and Miss Lacey, and the voters are going to have a very, very clear choice to make. Are they going to want someone who has been in management most of the last couple of decades and has not been in a courtroom in the last couple of decades versus a battle-tested veteran prosecutor who's been in the courtroom as recently as a year ago? That's going to help define how we run our campaign, because the issues are going to be relatively clear, relatively straightforward. That's been the game changer.
Okay. So you being better positioned, let's shift ourselves into the issues.
Sure.
Some of the ones that you highlighted in your campaign materials.
Yes.
Specifically public corruption.
Yes.
You say you are going to bring a multi-agency approach
Right.
to handling that. In the last couple of years, we've seen a couple examples. The county assessor allegations, right. The city of Bell, and you say you will prosecute that vigorously.
Correct.
What does that mean in layman's terms?
Jamie, the reason that I put that as such a high priority is because if I truly believe that public corruption strikes at the heart of what we call our democracy more deeply than any other crime committed. Public corruption, when we can't trust our public officials, when we literally can't trust those that we honor by putting them into office, when they are corrupt, when they're then looking at their own best interests as opposed to our best interests as a community, I think that undermines the very government that we fight for every single day. That's why public corruption is so important to me. When I talk about a multi-agency approach, what I'm talking about is enhancing and invigorating the line of communication between the local agencies and the district attorney's office. We're an office of 1,000 lawyers, 1,000 plus lawyers when we're fully staffed. We're a little bit below that right now, but that's a ton of folks that are looking out for your interests and who have the ability to prosecute cases correctly, the way that they should be prosecuted. You also have local agencies scattered throughout the largest county in the world, the largest county in the country. Very well, maybe the largest county in the world, I don't know. we have to build a relationship between these smaller agencies because they know what's going on in their city.
Absolutely.
They know what's going on the ground. And I think it's really important. I think you would probably agree. It's incredibly important to make sure that we know, as a prosecutorial agency, everything that we possibly can about what's happening in local communities.
Sure.
With that multi-agency approach, we'll have better communication, and it won't be 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 years before we find out about this corruption. That's what happened in Bell. That was one of the issues that we're constantly fighting against. It was extremely well investigated, but we didn't know about it. We weren't even aware of it until years had gone by. And the corrupt officials, or the alleged corrupt officials, had been profiting off the back, or profiteering off the backs of their constituents. We need to make sure that we are more on the spot. And I think a multi-agency approach to that, a better line of communication between the public and our office, is the way that we serve that.
Okay. The next issue is violent crime.
Yes.
You state in your materials that you will communicate with the community and parents and children about violent crime.
Correct.
How do you go about putting in place a strategy, you being the chief prosecutor, being, in a different sort of social setting as opposed to individuals you're speaking with? How do you bridge that gap?
Through our deputies.
Okay.
I think we do it through our deputies. We have liaisons within the office, and we build a policy within the office of using those 1,000 lawyers that I talked to you about a second ago, and making sure that the folks that are literally populating the courtrooms in 22 different branch and area courts throughout the county, they are acting as a liaison to their own community, their own community members, folks that are in positions of authority in education, folks that are having trouble raising their own child, parents. We have to act in a way that promotes communication. I think that's the key. If we can promote communication, we can start getting to the heart of why kids are joining gangs in the first place. And that's an extraordinarily important aspect of what we do. I'll give you a little anecdote if you'll allow me.
Yeah.
Working in Compton for more than 5 years, about 5.5 years, I was prosecuting the worst of the worst gang members over and over and over and over, one line of cases after another. So I really learned to cut my teeth on prosecuting gang cases in Compton, in the Compton courthouse. I met dozens and dozens and dozens of little kids, children, 10, 11-year-old little kids, 13-year-old little kids, through the course of my prosecutions, meeting victims' family members, meeting defendants' family members, etc. I never met one child, Jamie, not one, who told me they went home at night and dropped to their knees and prayed to their God that they would grow up and be a gang member. Not one child. But I met dozens who thought they had no other opportunity, no other alternative, no other choice. We're there to give them that choice. And if we can start to do that from the front end, give kids opportunities and alternatives that they don't think they have, through interagency coordination, through community coordination, if we can do that, we can save that child from ever joining the gang in the first place. And isn't that what we're here for? Secondarily, we can prosecute the gang members who do prey on the communities in which they live. There's nobody better at that than I am. I literally wrote the book on modern prosecutions of gangs. I know how to prosecute a gang. I know how to take a gang down, not just a gang member, but a gang down. It's that sort of coordinated effort, stopping kids from joining gangs in the first place, and robustly and assertively prosecuting the gang members that are preying on the community. It's that sort of combined approach that I think will serve to lower the violent crime rate here in Los Angeles.
Okay. And a follow-up to that is, obviously, I guess the coin word would be cultural sensitivity, maybe.
Of course.
And, listen, as a lawyer, I get that there might be a distinction sometimes when you're dealing with people in the community and speaking in a language that they understand. So will you provide your deputies with sensitivity training? Will you teach them how they're supposed to interact with the community?
Absolutely.
What kind of, policies will you put in place or training?
I'm very glad you asked that, because that's the difference between how I approached prosecuting gang cases in Compton and how many deputies who had come before me approached prosecuting gang cases. It's not a matter of opening a book, figuring out what the penal code says, applying a couple of facts to the law and then walking into a courtroom and picking a jury. That's not prosecuting a gang case. Prosecuting a gang case requires putting your feet on the ground, getting out into the communities, sitting in a living room, talking to the family members, talking to someone who's lost a loved one. I can't tell you, Jamie, the number of folks that I sat with, the number of people who weren't necessarily consistent with my background, but there I sat in their living room, chatting with them about what their loss meant to them, talking to them about what the process was going to include. Many folks would come into my office and say, I'm so lost. I don't know what this prosecution is going to be about. I don't know where we go from here. And I spent hours and hours and hours, sometimes days and weeks and months, talking to and educating and being a shoulder to cry on for family members who had lost a child, a brother, a husband, a wife. In the community. It's that kind of sensitivity, I think, that allows us to speak with a unified voice with the victims, with the community members, with witnesses. That's exactly what we should be doing. That's exactly the kind of modern approach that I've taken. That's exactly what I will bring to the leadership of this office and make sure my deputies all understand as they populate the courtrooms throughout the county.
Okay. Well, we've been speaking in the abstract. Let's get a little more specific. I know on July 4th, a young lady by the name of Unique was a victim of violent crime, a shooting that I'm sure you're aware of. How would you handle a prosecution like that, being the chief legal prosecutor, with the community being in uproar or concerned about what happened?
Well, I think you handle it with sensitivity. We talked a little bit about, right at the beginning, not to get abstract, but to get more specific, we talked at the beginning about listening to the community. You have to be a good speaker when you're running for the DA's office. You have to be, and as the DA, you have to be articulate about what the office policies are. But I think it's just as important to be a good listener. You have to listen to the to what the community is sensitive to. You have to listen to what the community wants. You have to listen to what the community expects out of their leadership. And as long as we're acting within the bounds of ethics and the law, we should attend to those expectations, that sensitivity, those community sort of outcries. We have to listen to that, and only then can we start to work in unison with the community to prosecute the cases the way they should be prosecuted. You're not always going to make everybody happy, and that's not the job of the DA to make everybody happy. That's not the job of the police to make everybody happy. But what we can do is make sure that we're listening to what they want, listening to what the community members expect. They are stakeholders in public safety. All of us are. The police, all law enforcement, the DA's office, the public defender's office, the entire defense bar, the judiciary, and the community. We're all stakeholders in public safety. I think that's how we have to handle any case in which there's some kind of an outcry.
Okay. All right. And you spoke of modernizing the office with technology. Obviously,
we're desperate for that, by
yeah,
the way.
That's my question.
Yes.
You know, obviously, crimes have moved into a different domain.
The 21st
literally
century.
domains.
Absolutely.
Right. You know, cyber crimes, fraud, stealing, stolen identities. How will you be able to secure funding to move the DA's office up in their technological, sophistication?
Well, we have the technology. We
Okay.
really do. We have some of the best investigators, the most highly educated investigators in the country.
Okay.
Some of the Secret Service, some of the federal investigators literally learn from our investigators. We
Okay.
teach their classes. We teach the FBI. We teach the Secret Service. We
Okay.
teach ATF. We've got folks trained from Carnegie Mellon to, some of the best schools in the country. We have cyber experts insofar as identity theft and bank fraud and things of that nature are concerned. We just need more of them. We just need more of them, Jamie. It's as simple as that. How do we expand that? We beg for more money.
Okay.
But in a time of crisis, economic crisis that we're in, some are saying as much as $16, $17 billion in debt in the state alone. Where are we going to get that money? That's yet to be seen. But what we have to have at the helm of the office is someone who's willing to prioritize that. We've got 1,000 DAs. We've got almost a police force of almost 300. We can be smart about how we fungibly move those resources around, move the chess pieces on the board to make sure that we're paying attention to what we need to be paying attention to. And you hit it right on the head. Identity theft, which people think, well, How bad is that? Identity theft, it's not that big a
It's
deal.
very bad.
It's very bad. It's really bad, because that's the beginning of them getting into your CDs,
Sure.
them getting into your bank accounts, your securities, your
Oh, yeah.
your home, your address, your children, where they go to school. I mean, identity theft is a major, major concern of mine, and it will be a major concern of my administration.
Okay. We sort of talked about, the one thing that I always like to talk about is the elephant in the room, which is politics.
Right.
And a lot of your policies, they will have to be politicized just a little bit in order for you to get things done. Multi-agency, projects, talking to the community, petitioning for more money. What are some things that you will do specifically in order to sort of pull those political strings?
Well, a lot of what you're talking about is relationship building.
Mm.
It's simply relationship building. I have an extraordinarily good relationship with, for instance, the Board of Supervisors.
Okay.
The County Board of Supervisors is a 5-person board that governs the budget for the District Attorney's Office.
Okay.
I've already been endorsed by 2 of those 5 members.
Okay.
Which is more than Ms. Lacey has been endorsed by.
Okay.
I have a good working relationship with the Board of Supervisors, and I think the reason that I will be extraordinarily effective at building that conduit of communication, it comes down to one word: respect. They will know that if I walk into the Board of Supervisors and ask for X, Y, Z, whatever that might be, political or not, they know that they've got the respect to know that I've been in the courtroom. I know what's required to provide the deputies the tools they need to seek justice. They know that I'm not just reading it in a book.
Mhm.
It's not just a white paper that's come across my desk and I've shuffled it to the other side of my desk. It comes from 17 years of experience in the courtroom.
Mhm.
And that's ultimately what our goal is, to make sure that we're providing the tools so that we can do our job inside the courtroom. That's the mission of the DA's office. When I go to those individuals in a position of authority, be they the Board of Supervisors, be they legislators up in Sacramento, they will all know I'm going to them. Alan Jackson is approaching us from the perspective of a modern prosecutor.
Mhm.
What is it that he needs? If he says he needs this, or that the office needs this or that or the other thing, they're going to know that it's not something that I take lightly.
Mhm.
It's going to come from a position of experience.
Okay. And then moving into the November election, what can we see coming from the Alan Jackson campaign?
A win. How's that? You've thrown that softball up for me twice now. I like these questions. I think what you can expect to see in an Alan Jackson campaign as we move forward is a very, very robust discussion with the community. We are going to do everything we can to make sure we have as much voter contact, as much community member contact as we can possibly get. One thing I have, one commodity I have that is it just kind of keeps on coming, and it seems endless, is a boundless amount of energy. I have motivation and I have energy. I will go any place. I will speak to any group. I have spoken to groups all over the county, and I expect to continue to do that, all the way from Antelope Valley to Long Beach to Santa Monica on the west side, out to the San Gabriel Valley, and every place in between. My goal is to make sure that I'm speaking to as many communities as possible to find out what the issues are they're most concerned about. What do they want in their DA? And how can I answer the questions that they've got on their mind? As long as I can continue to do that through the radio, through TV, those are traditional methods, but more importantly through personal contact, sitting down with folks like you who are interested in the DA's race. That's my job. That's my responsibility to the public, to make sure I open myself up and make myself as transparent as possible, let folks ask me anything they want to ask me, and let me answer. And I think when folks hear my answers and listen to my philosophies, they're going to understand I'm the best person to make sure that we ensure public safety for their streets, their communities, their neighborhoods, and their families.
Okay. And how can people connect with you?
On a one-to-one basis, just call the campaign and ask,
Okay.
and I'll be there.
Okay.
There's no place too far for me to drive. There's no place too far for me to walk. There's no community member that I'm not willing to sit down and meet. Our campaign is one of openness and transparency, and all of that is on the website. All of our contact information is on the website at votealanjackson.com. If someone wants me to meet a group of theirs, if it's 4 people in a house in Hancock Park, I've done that. If it's 400 people in an auditorium, I've done that too.
Okay.
I will go any place, anywhere, anytime, and open myself up to questioning. I think that's how the community will start to understand, you know what, Alan Jackson is the real deal. He's not hiding anything. He's not a politician. He's a prosecutor who's looking forward to modernizing this office as we walk forward.
Okay. And if there was a one-word summary of what you would call yourself or your campaign that people could use as a takeaway to identify you, what would that be?
Has to be one word.
One word.
We're lawyers, Jamie. You know we can't say anything in one word, for goodness sake. Character.
Okay.
Character. I hope that when this is done, I truly hope that when this is over and my campaign, and I'm looking in the rearview mirror at my campaign, looking back on it, I hope that people walk away and say, that man has character. I like him. I don't necessarily like everything that he says. I like some things he says. I don't like other things he says. I'm never going to please everybody. But my job is not to please everybody. My job is to maintain character.
Okay.
And if I can do that, then I've been successful.
Character it is. Thank you so much, Alan.
My pleasure. Thank you, Jamie.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for taking the time. I really do appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And that's it for our two-part interview with District Attorney's candidate, Alan Jackson. We hope you have a lot more information on this particular candidate, and we hope we've helped you clarify your position on who should be the County of Los Angeles District Attorney. Jackie Lacey is on the horizon. That's it for this edition of Newswire L.A. We thank you for joining us. To follow everything Newswire L.A., look us up on Facebook and Twitter at Newswire L.A. And as I like to say with these political shows, remember to get out and vote. In this case, get out and vote on November 6th. This is a right people have fought for and have died for. That's it for all of us. I'm Chin Thomasanksi saying so long, and we'll see you back here next time. And now, a Newswire L.A. editorial. The recent Occupy movement came about as the result of the feeling that the current system of democratic government is no longer effective. People no longer believe that casting a ballot affects any change, so they're turning out in the streets to have their voices heard instead. Newswire L.A. did some research, and we're finding that our system of government actually can be saved if we do a few things. This editorial is a look at what we, the voters, must do to keep one of the most effective systems of government on earth alive. We paid a visit to the Los Angeles City Clerk's office and looked at the certified data for the most recent election held on March 8, 2011. Do you know there are 1,644,647 registered voters inside the city limits? Yet on March 8th, only 267,340 ballots were cast. That shakes out to only 14% of all registered voters going to the polls. If you factor out the LA Unified and the LA Community College District elections, you find that you can drop that total by 1% to a total of 13%. 13% of the voters made decisions that affected a silent majority of 87%. How is that allowed to happen? Well, we believe there are three major reasons. First, the vast majority of silent voters believe their votes mean nothing in this system. Many of those people made up this past year's Occupy movement. Two, others say they don't have the time to deal with politics. Their own lives have to come first. Finally, you have an electorate who is uneducated when it comes to how the system works. Additionally, when election time rolls around, little or no time is devoted to getting to know the candidates or the issues. Let's visit these observations one by one. First, there are the silent voters. Citing our earlier data from the clerk's office, the silent voters made up a mammoth 87% of the voters in LA City. On March 8th, if that 87% or 1.5 million voters cast ballots in that election, they could have affected the direction of this city in a major way. During every election cycle, there are movements to get more voters out and to pull silent voters out of the shadows. Remember, the choice to act is yours. If you feel the best course of action is to simply drop out, that's fine, but be aware that other people are making decisions for you that affect your life. Second, there are people who don't have time. All of us are living in a time when we're working longer hours and caring for more family members. The system knows this, and that's why most information is available via the internet. That information can be downloaded in PDF form, or it can just be read right on the screen. The average person spends 8 hours per week surfing the internet. Why not use one or more of those hours to do something that is truly beneficial? In some counties, you can electronically vote at precincts, but the generally accepted method is the absentee ballot. The ballot is mailed to your home within a 3-week window of the election. All you have to do is take the previously marked sample ballot and transcribe your choices to a Scantron or punch card. A 45-cent stamp will send that ballot on its way back to the city or county clerk's office, where it will be counted. Finally, and we've arrived at the most complex and damning observation, the lack of knowledge by the electorate. This problem is systemic. Beginning more than a decade ago, courses such as history and civics were de-emphasized in favor of filling the achievement gaps in reading and math. According to a June 2011 article by the Lexington Institute, the report goes on to state that only 1/4, or 25% of American students scored at or above proficiency in their grasp of U.S. history. An abysmal performance came from high school seniors, with only 12% achieving proficiency or higher. The scores among minority candidates were also abysmally low. This de-emphasis of history and government gained traction in the early 1990s. Today's generation, those who make up a majority of the Occupy movement, represent those cited in the Lexington Institute article. As for the rest of us who've decided that all we need to know about a candidate or an issue we can find in a mailer or in a commercial, well, we have to point out to you just how devastating that is. Commercials and mailers are designed to enhance a candidate or an issue in their favor. They are also used to demonize the opposing side, sometimes using skewed or questionable data. What about candidates and initiatives who don't have the funding for elaborate media and mailing campaigns? Are those candidates less qualified than those who can afford slick mailers and commercials? No, not in the least. Commercials and mailers don't tell you the whole story about the candidates or the initiatives. Let me cite some of the bond measures that have been voted into existence over the past 20 years or so. Let's say we vote to implement Measure A, which is designed as a school improvement bond. All we have to do is okay the issuance of $200 million in general obligation bonds. Those bonds will mature in 20 years. It sounds good, right? If that state or municipality is in dire straits like we are now, they risk going into default. The only recourse is to add fees and surcharges onto the weary electorate. Sadly, all of this could have been avoided by having an electorate that voted more with their heads than with their hearts. As we conclude this editorial, I want to cite one more section of the 2011 Lexington Institute article. The report stated that half or more of teenagers were not adequately prepared to identify a single right protected by the First Amendment, or to recognize that the U.S. Constitution proclaims that government's authority is based on the people's consent, and their consent only. Newswire L.A. says that observation just doesn't apply to teenagers. It applies to each and every